Today, Africa is operating under what is a grand agenda, the grand agenda of Africa 2063. And if you read the grand agenda of 2063 and the 7 pillars, Africans are promising themselves many things, all of which ride on infrastructure. We are promising ourselves that we are going to improve the quality of the lives of our people, which demand that we have roads. But look at Africa today. The statistics were read to you here. Do we have roads that can stand the scrutiny of quality? Is it possible for one to move from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to Dhaka in Senegal? Is it possible for one to have goods moving from Cape Town to Cairo in Egypt? Do we have such roads? Do we have railway systems that can convey goods from the port of Beira to Bangui in Central African Republic? Do we have them? Do we have systems that can help us in that regard? When we talk about the provision of infrastructure that deals with water, do we have infrastructure that can deal with that? Do we have infrastructure that can deal with solid and non-solid waste? Do we? The answer is we don't. And the little that we have, do we maintain them properly? And the little that we have, must we depend on others in order to maintain them? Or we can maintain them ourselves? These are the questions that I urge you to consider during this conference, because if we don't, the continent will be perennially dependent upon others. And when you are dependent upon others, then you cannot sleep easy. There is a proverb amongst the Mosi in Burkina Faso that when you sleep on a borrowed mat, you can never have sweet dreams. And I'm suggesting to you that we must now give away the mat that we borrowed so that we have our own mats, that we may have sweet dreams and sleep easy. Africa Agenda 2063 is a promise that we are going to have energy, that Iran produces more electricity than all African countries combined, excluding Egypt and South Africa. If we are in such a state, then we know that we are in trouble. And the only way to get ourselves out of trouble is to begin to innovate and invent. Whenever I go to Namibia, there is a big poster saying that Namibia can supply the whole of Africa with solar energy. Good, but have they? Beyond the declaration, we have solar, but can we harness solar power? And even when we harness solar power, tell me, you great engineers present here, which African country makes solar panels? Which one? None. Which African company is in the business of solar research and development? Which one? Which university in Africa is involved in research and development in solar? None. And if you are not involved, how then can we talk about sustainability? We are talking about wind as clean energy. Which university in Africa is involved in the area of research and development in wind energy? None. And I'm suggesting to you that it is your institution that must begin to work with industry and with the academy so that we can begin to get into the arena of research and development and therefore be the fuel that catalyzes sustainable development as contemplated under Africa Agenda 2063. Right now, because we are in the business of promising ourselves things, we have also promised ourselves that we have something called Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Good. On paper, you can't fault it. But tell me, engineers, how are we going to trade amongst ourselves if we don't have the right infrastructure? I remember talking to a friend of mine who is in the poultry business in Liberia. He put up a farm in Liberia and he had his first major product to transport to Sierra Leone. He lost 90% of his eggs courtesy of the bad roads. So that when you want to trade, you must also have good infrastructure. Africa Continental Free Trade Area is only going to have meaning when we have supportive infrastructure. And that is why you have big business. It is a tall order. And today, therefore, during this conference and during the period that we are here, I believe that the clarion call should be, are we engaging sufficiently, innovatively, in a manner that is going to ensure that going forward we have good roads? We are asking ourselves, are we going to engage effectively to ensure that going forward we have good energy and in sufficient quantities? Are we going to ensure that we have sufficient know-how in order to harness the resources that we have? Are we going to ensure that there is sufficient connectivity within the universities and interaction between universities and industries so that we have a continent that is capable of carrying the load of development on the back of sustainable infrastructure? You know, there is a beautiful saying that if a cat wants to become a lion, the first thing is that it must lose its appetite for rats. I'm suggesting to us that if we are such a cat, the time is now to lose our appetite for rats. Because it is only then that we are going to engage in activities that will ensure that we can invent and innovate. Today, we know that Africa did not earn the dividends of the first industrial revolution as it ought to have, or even the second, or even the third. Today, we are in the fourth industrial revolution. When we are talking about artificial intelligence and we are talking about all those things, have we contemplated how that is going to impact on how we deal with infrastructure? Have we asked ourselves how we are going to ensure that what we have will develop the things that we ought to? Have we asked ourselves what we are going to do with the resources that we have so that we have value addition? If it is in the area of energy that I've already talked about, have we contemplated how that is going to be impacted upon through artificial intelligence? These are the things that I am urging all of us to wrap our minds around, because I have no doubt that we have the intellectual capacity to do it. The 300 of you who are assembled here and who are only a sprinkling of the many engineers in different facets of the engineering profession, I am urging all of us who are present here that going forward we must constantly remind ourselves that it is we who will bring change in the continent of Africa. To constantly remind ourselves that infrastructure is the mother's milk of sustainable development. To constantly remind ourselves that without sound infrastructure, Africa will always continue to punch below her weight. That without good infrastructure in all areas, Africa cannot attain the goal that she has set for herself under Agenda 2063 and it cannot earn the dividend that we contemplate under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. That without infrastructure, even the soft social infrastructure such as health and education will not be served in the manner that they ought to be served. That without infrastructure, Africa cannot compete with the rest of the world. And without infrastructure, Africa will always be a begging continent. And without infrastructure, our continent cannot grow. It must pain us that the 1.4 billion of us, our GDP is still less than the GDP of Spain. It must pain all of us. It must pain all of us that we do not have paved roads that are good enough to sustain the business that we have. It must pain all of us. And you who engineers who are here, I'm today inviting you to take a solemn vow that going forward, you are going to use the platform that you have to make a contribution to make Africa realize our potential. It is not rocket science. It is something that can be done because it has been done by other civilizations, and I have no doubt in my mind that we can do it. So go out there into the world and ensure that you do something that will change African infrastructure through invention and innovation. If I spoke beyond this, I would be doing the wrong thing. I refuse to do the wrong thing. Go out there and do the right thing. Thank you, and have a good conference. One may wonder why you invite a lawyer to a conference of engineers. But I know why. I know you are inviting me because infrastructure has no boundaries. And you have invited me because you consider me to be a curious human being, a curious African who has interest in infrastructure. It is not lost on me that we are discussing infrastructure at a time when the continent is grappling with many issues which are related to infrastructure. It is not lost on me that this continent is at a time when she is asking herself how she can realize sustainable development, and that infrastructure is indeed significant in this journey. It is at a time when the continent is asking herself how she can lift her people to the higher orbits of development. And this is what makes legitimate the conversation around infrastructure. I've been specifically asked to talk about infrastructure and innovation. And the question that one poses, if we do not innovate, if we do not invent, can the continent realize our goals? Statistics tell us that our continent continues to lag behind in many areas. If you look at the railway infrastructure, many who are from different countries will tell you that it's only in the last few years that we have been trying to revive some of the networks that we had allowed to be dilapidated. If you look at the road network, you will agree with me that it's still very difficult to travel from one corner of Africa to the other. If you look at airline connectivity, many of you here have sad stories of how you had to go to different parts outside of Africa in order to arrive here. If you look at the quality of roads that we have in many African countries, you will know that infrastructure is